Okay, so we are going to get started. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for our NAMEPA MARPOL webinar series, celebrating the 50 years of marine pollution. And today's topic is going to be talking about compliance and safety. So my name is Megan Riley, and I'm an Education and Outreach Associate for the North American Marine Environment Protection Association. So before we get started, I just want to remind everyone to keep your cameras and microphones turned off. This allows the spotlight to be on our panelists this afternoon. This webinar is also being recorded and will be published to our YouTube channel in the next couple of days. So if you are missing it or if someone else is not able to attend, it will be recorded. I'm going to start by introducing NAMEPA, and is Carlene on with us this afternoon? All right, so Carlene, I believe, is traveling. But at NAMEPA, we like to save our seas and preserve the marine environment by promoting a sustainable maritime industry and those best practices, educating both the public and the maritime industry on saving our seas. And the best way to do that through education, through communicating with the maritime industry and that general public, and bridging that gap between the two. But I know we're really here to see our panelists. So our first panelist that I'd like to introduce is Deacon Paul Rosenbaum, who is who has been the chaplain of the Stella Marie's military ministry, and he's also the regional coordinator for the North American and the America and the Caribbean since 2018, and he's now the president of the North American Maritime Ministry Association. So, Paul, do you want to tell us a little bit more about what you do and what your organization does as well?
Sure. Thank you so much for this opportunity. I really have many different hats that I wear. And all of them lead me to an interest in the area of maritime, the maritime environment and protection and safety at sea, and all of these different things that we're going to be talking about. I spent nearly 30 years as a university level biology professor, and so I have a tremendous appreciation for the environment and the protection of the maritime environment, all environments, from that standpoint, simply as a biologist. I'm a resident of Charleston, South Carolina, a place that has a very active port, but also that largely drives the economy of the city. But the entire region is also dependent on the maritime environment for tourism and recreation, and for the economics that drive that. So that makes me interested in saving our seas and keeping things nice and clean that way as well. I've spent nearly 20 years involved in maritime ministry and working with crews, and the idea and the notion of safe ships for crews is a very important thing, and the importance of crew welfare in helping to maintain safety on seas. And finally, as a member of the clergy, I know that we are entrusted to be good stewards of the world and the environment, and both the people and everything else in the world. And so all of that leads me to my interest in this particular topic.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for being here with us today. And our second panelist that we have this afternoon is Captain Robert Hughes, who is currently a maritime consultant, but he was most recently the Chief Operating Officer for Genco Shipping and Trading. He's over 25 years experience in the maritime industry, and he's a maritime expert on all things maritime, but we're going to be tapping into his MARPOL compliance and safety today. So Rob, why don't you tell us about what you've been doing and who you are?
Well, thank you. I appreciate the lead in for that. My name is Rob Hughes. I grew up on the shores of Rockaway, Queens. So the sea's always been in my blood, and that's what led me to go to sea. So I've been in the maritime industry for 25 years after graduation from Merchant Marine Academy. I sailed up to getting my master's license, and have been in the marine industry since then, and as well as the U.S. Navy. So along the history of running ports, running ships, and most recently being with Genco Shipping and Trading. Now I'm an independent consultant. But leading people and leading an onboard ship ashore is crucial to this, right? This discussion here, it's something I'm passionate about, protecting the environment, saving our seas, and we can only do that as a team, from the top of leadership down to the deck plates of the ship. So thank you for the invitation to join in this discussion.
Thank you so much for being here. So we're going to jump right in here this afternoon. And the first topic that we're going to be talking about is how compliance promotes a safe working environment. So Rob, I'm going to turn this over to you first, and Deacon Paul, please jump in if you have something to add to it as well. But what makes MARPOL compliance so important with promoting a safe working environment?
Well, besides it's the law, it's the right thing to do, right? And I think that understanding how these laws came to be are really important. And this is when you explain things to the sailors and in your comrades on board ship or in the boardroom, the understanding the why, right? It's important to explain that these laws came into being for protecting our seas. And we've gotten a lot better over the past 30 years in my involvement, but there's still a lot way to go. Enforcing shipping regulations, it leads to something that protects the environment. It leads to a culture of safety. Everyone goes to sea in a culture of safety with all their fingers and toes, I would say. Aboard a ship, it's easily to get hurt. It's an industrial environment. It's very easy if you're careless with your oneself, that it can trickle over to damaging of the environment. So it's a cooperative approach towards making sure that we can save our seas and the people that work upon them. That's a nutshell. I can go into, you could definitely try to prevent the workness injuries and improve the compliance with regulations. I'm a big proponent that if you do these things, you'll reduce costs because you won't have to pay for injuries to our sailors, most importantly. You won't have to pay the damages to the environment, another big one. But it all comes back to engagement, right? Engagement of the workers from the deck plates right up into the boardroom. If everyone is not sold on the idea of what's important, and everything has to be consciously thought out meticulously and executed flawlessly, you can run into a real problem. I think that all these things, if they line up properly, you lead yourself into a position where there's a culture of safety aboard the ship, where people just don't haphazardly do things. The safety management systems that are established by the company, they read well on every ship I've been to, but are they enforced? But if they are enforced and people do care, and then leadership gets on the ships themselves to follow up, that leads to a healthy ship in my mind, and the environment. I hope that answers your question. A little bit long-winded there.
Deacon Paul, do you have anything to add on what makes MARPOL compliance important?
Yeah, I think Rob hit it with this idea of promoting, fostering a culture of safety on ships. This is just one part of that culture of safety related to environmental protection, but it fits in well with STCW and MLC 2006 and all of the other regulations that are enforced to varying degrees sometimes, but promote that culture of safety where you are mindful of what you're doing on ship, mindful of taking care of the equipment, maintaining safe environments. That all fits together. And when you do that, when you do all of those things, the people on the ship are safer, the environment's safer, and we're all healthier for that. Even people that never set foot in the ocean are healthier because of that, because we're affecting fisheries and many other aspects of the aquatic environment that really do affect everybody.
Yes. Rob, so you've worked within the cargo shipping industry really hands-on. So what does compliance with that safety regulations look like in all of those different sectors?
Oh, compliance. Well, in the different sectors, I think if you're talking about different types of ships, every ship has its own animal, right? Whether you're talking about passenger ships, there's different challenges with that, right? There's different challenges with dry bulk and the types of different cargoes you're going to carry, and of course you get into tankers and you get into chemical tankers and containers. Everyone has what types of cargoes. So there's different rules that go with that with MARPOL. The rules for MARPOL, about maritime pollution, for those that may not be from the maritime environment, protecting the environment, what things can and should never go over the side. That's important, right? If we look back through history, what happened on our shores and with the Exxon Valdez, it's a tragedy. If you look back, what happened on the shores of New York City, where I'm from, during the 80s, with medical garbage washing up on the shores, and they still do, unfortunately. There's strict rules what can and should not go into the sea. So there are positive movements about what rules are going into place. Everything from, you see people restricting straws by the shoreline. Should have been a long time ago. Styrofoam not going in. But more than the pollutants into the sea, the culture. It goes back to the culture. That understanding people understanding the why of why we're doing certain things. It's a symbiote circle, right? If you take care of your people on the ship, they'll take care of the environment. And if they take care of each other at that symbiote circle, it's the yin and yang of it, right? They'll take care of you. But if we don't take care of our seas, that symbiote circle is going to collapse onto itself. So compliance, again, it come back down to a compliance. If you don't follow up on what you say you're going to do as a company, as an industry, there's always going to be people that are going to try to take shortcuts, or in the Navy they call it gun decking. They're gonna take shortcuts, and then I did this a little bit, and then a little bit more, and then a little bit more, and it's wrong, right? The way we have it right now is zero tolerance for oil in the water. That's right. It should have been right a long time before, 30 years ago, but they were a lot more forgiving. We're getting better now with plastics and things of styrofoams and things that just don't break down, right? Beach cleanups, raising awareness, so people have that level of cognizance rather than that cognitive dissonance of walking past and have this flick the cigarette butt, or I'll throw the garbage out the window as I'm driving. Understanding what that why is. So it's a broader thing beyond the ship. In events like this and webinars help raise that level of awareness. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah. And Deacon Paul, you work with seafarers across all levels, across all sectors. So how are you seeing that safety regulation vary between them in regards to MARPOL?
Well, I deal primarily in my port with container vessels. I think the compliance is very good on those ships. I go on those vessels. Container vessels that we see, those are the luxury liners of the shipping industry in a lot of ways, and I see very good compliance on those. The trash is kept, everything is kept clean and up to date, and work and done. Things are being done properly. It's the best I know. I don't get down in the engine rooms too much, but I'm assuring at the few times I've gone down in there, you could eat off of the floors in the engine rooms and of most of these container vessels. Do go on some bulk carriers, not quite so pristine. I think they are trying their best, but they are not in general as safe vessels, I think, sometimes as the container vessels. So in general, I can't say that the compliance with MARPOL is better or worse or the same, but I think that there's more leeway there and perhaps more room for violations on bulkers and general cargo ships than there are on the big container vessels. Don't do much with passenger ships, so I can't make any comments there. I do want to talk one thing about this culture of safety. It has to be, as Rob says, it has to start from the top down in a company. It has to be something that is a value of the company, sort of an ethic of the company. I think we see this in all aspects of human behavior. If it's just something that we will obey the rules because we're afraid of punishment, or that just leads you to risk the punishment a lot of times. See that driving around and people running red lights and speeding and all of those things. So if the company's attitude is we're going to obey the rules just because we want to stay out of trouble. I don't think that filters down well to the level of the people who are actually going to be affected by these things. So getting it to be a value because it is something good for the world is a very important thing. And I think, we're making progress, as Rob said, in that. There's still a long way to go in the States and in other parts of the world, certainly, that have where the economies are not quite so robust and people are living hand to mouth. There's less attention paid to environmental protection, but I think we are making good progress here in the States. There's still a long way to go, just in the general public, with getting people to understand the need to preserve the maritime environment, every environment that we have. But we are making good progress.
Yes, wonderful. And Deacon Paul, how does that compliance with those safety regulations benefit those companies in terms of reputation or liability with the general public?
Well, I think they can. I don't know if they do this well enough sometimes, but I think the companies that are compliant need to make that known to the public. I think the public would let's say you're a passenger wanting to go on a cruise and you've got a choice between different cruise lines. I know people, I think myself, would want to go with the on the ships that have the better compliance. We'd feel better about that we're contributing in our own way while we're a passenger. But I think if shipping companies I will tell you, ships in general don't always have the best reputations in ports. Rob might know that. They're dirty. They are seen as polluting. We've had a big controversy trying to build a new passenger terminal here, and with a lot of uproar over that, because ships are seen as being detrimental, not just to the environment, but to the civic environment as well, a lot of times. And if companies are compliant and can make it known to the communities that they are doing things to make their communities better, I think that goes a long way. I think it also goes a long way in, there are lots of issues with retention of seafarers now, particularly American seafarers, that I'm not versed in the details, but I've heard and talked with seafarers who, are not looking to make long careers out of seafaring anymore. I think the more the companies can promote that they are safe and reliable and responsible companies, that will help them with that retention as well. So that could be a side benefit to this as well. And I don't think any company wants to be the one that is known for, like, the Exxon Valdez again.
Yeah.
And their liability, the cost to that shipping company that does something like that is going to be quite severe.
Yes. Rob, how do you see that safety regulations benefiting the company from your side?
Well, I think you have to, just to further on with Deacon Paul was talking about, is I think we have to realize that we're all one team in here, right? And when the ship goes into port, that perception that a ship is dirty or hazardous for the environment, well, is as much as the narrative that has to be conveyed by the ship owner as the people that are stewards of the waterfront, to understand that that's not true, right? Certain ships, we talked about cargoes, we talked about the inherent vices, cruise ships, and the concern with garbage or the concern with sewage, right? People are the inherent vice, right? That bulkers, those are the dry cargoes of organic chemicals, cargoes, right? So that's grain and cements and fertilizers. But it doesn't mean you want to find that in the water or spillage or anything like that. But less harmful for the environment. But oil tankers and chemical tankers more. But when we start talking about regulations benefiting the company, when your company does the right thing, you're on the track for success. When you do the wrong things, you're opening yourself up to liability, lawsuits, criminal fines, financial liabilities, that the sky is the limit. because what has changed over the number of years is you're not going to be not only the liability and the fines, but the size and scope of the fines, right? You literally, you make a malicious decision, you could put your company out of business. You put oil in the water maliciously. Listen, accidents happen, and the number of accidents, I'm not making excuses here, the number of accidents have gone down precipitously in the past 30 years. Those are huge. But if you maliciously do something, you could be out of business. If you're on a cruise ship, and everyone remembers the video from the late 90s of guys throwing plastic bags of the garbage, right? And the fines were huge. And we hear stories about the magic pipe. But more to the event that happens, if you develop it takes one mess up, one single mess up, and trust is broken. Trust is broken with the stakeholders ashore, with your customers, and it may be irreparable. You may not be able to recover if it's bad enough, right? It takes a lot. You have to build up a lot of trust and confidence in the people on the waterfront that you're doing the right things. You're running a profitable business, of course, but that's not the first and foremost thing. That you're respectful of the environment, you're respectful of your people. I mean, as Deacon Paul talked about, the number one resource for a maritime company are our seafarers, right? And the past 3 years, we have lost so many seafarers that don't want to go to sea. And they don't want to go to sea because during COVID, they couldn't get off. They were treated as prisoners. They were beyond ships for, whether it be American flag or foreign flag. You could be stranded on a ship for upwards of a year without a relief. If we're going to talk about the operational environment a little bit broader, more towards the MLC side, that resource has to be respected. And if we burn that, unfortunately, I think that we've burned out a lot of that resource for a while. I think it's going to take years to recover from that, to get people, as Deacon Paul said, they want to go back to sea and the benefits of going to sea. Because when people are aboard ship, when we start talking about that culture of safety, it's not just, we talk about from the top down, yes, we talk about safety. We try to reinforce it by visits aboard ship. But there's another part to that. The stakeholders on the waterfront have to be committed to that idea too. And they can't let them not have the facilities or the ability to get off that ship. And that's wrong if they're preventing them to get off that ship. That's wrong if they don't have the facilities to take care of the garbage or the sewage, or to properly handle that cargo to get off, whether it be by grab discharge or making sure the chick sands of the oil tanker, the discharge of the oil tankers are not in pristine position. It takes a village, as we used to say in the 80s and 90s, right, to raise a child. And on the waterfront, it's the same thing. It takes a village, right? So commitment from the top to the bottom on board the shipping company for sure, but also the stakeholders within the marine ecosystem.
Yes. Deacon Paul, within your organization or throughout the maritime industry, what services and measures are in place in regards to MARPOL to protect mariners, and why are these services important?
Well, within NAMA and within Stella Maris, we're doing what we can to, not specifically for MARPOL enforcement, but just for the general welfare of the seafarers. We have facilities and just to take care of their physical and spiritual needs when they need, to keep them healthy and happy, which I think is a very important thing for safety in general. There was a study that came out, Idwal, a company in England that is a surveyor, inspector. They have and I don't know the details of their questionnaires and their inspections because they don't publish that, but they've added some questions about and some data points on crew welfare what they can see about crew welfare on their vessels. And it's a small number of data points compared to the entire survey that they do. But they have found that there's a strong correlation between happy ships and safe ships, happy crew and safe ships. And I think, the little bit that we can do in our, seafarers ministries to make seafarers happy contributes to the safety of the vessels and the compliance with MARPOL and other compliant and other protocols. I wanted to touch back and just circle back to something Rob said, though. We know that bad news is flies fast and wide, and good news does not. And this is true in every area. It's not just the maritime area. So I think that's why it's so important for the industry to publicize their good news, and do things, because the people around that are seeing the ships, that are working in the cities, in the ports, they'll see the accidents, and the accidents will be in the paper and all over the place, but the good things that are being done are not there. And that's just a general part of our life. But I think it really would be good for the industry to take a good look at how they can get the good stories out and influence, so that people know that they are good partners, good part to work with.
Rob, do you have anything to add?
Oh yeah, I think he's spot on. If you talk to anyone that's not involved in the maritime industry and you ask them of what comes in on ships, a lot of people don't know. Surprisingly, a lot of people think things come in on planes, and that's not the case. The maritime industry feeds the world. 80% of commerce goes on ships. I think a lot of understanding and a lot of that narrative that he spoke to, that Deacon Paul spoke about, is important. Because while the IMO started telling people this, and other organizations have talked about the goodness that shipping does, everything from employing large swaths of people from all races, colors, creeds, and origins. We feed the world. We build the world. Things that build buildings, that build infrastructure, that build and sustain life is moved on the sea. Large swaths of different distances too. But like he talked about earlier, there's mechanisms in place, right? So as a baseline, you have the Maritime Labor Convention that was in place. That's a good first effort, right? It is. It lays out the Bill of Rights, if you will, for sailors that are aboard a ship and how that. But those are the things that empower port state controls around the world to do a follow-up. But remember, these are the last line of defense. If you're just making the bare minimum towards MLC requirements, Maritime Labor Convention requirements, you're not going far enough. And remember, this was built in 2006. The world has changed from when I went to sea, started going to sea 30 years ago till now. It's never as slow as it is today. He talked about the good news and the bad news going fast. But evolving the way we do things to support the sailors is huge. We're never as slow as it's going to be at this very moment. It's only going to get faster. Previously, when I went to sea, it was you get an email once a day. When I left Genco, these guys were getting instant messages from their loved ones immediately because of the Wi-Fi and satellite connections. There's positives and negatives to that, but there's also mental strain. One of the things we never thought of 30 years ago was mental wellness, happy ships, looking after the sailors. And this all comes around because if you do have a happy ship, the fellas at Ottawa, Nick is a top-notch fella. Nick, if you're listening, I always thought the world of your work, but they are doing great things. And when they start talking about morale of the ship, when they start talking about a happy ship, there is a strong correlation to ships that gel together, that can work through differences together, adversity together. They're better functioning ships. They're higher capable. There's less injuries. The ships that don't have that culture, if they think it's all punitive, you start to see the recidivism of trips to the doctor. I need to get off on medical, or the accidents, they go up. You can literally chart them on a ship by ship comparison. A happy ship versus a ship that needs more attention. I was proud to say at my previous employer, the management would go aboard those ships, right, and get engaged and find out what's going on, unannounced. We'd go aboard and just, we're here. Because if you announce it, everyone puts on that best foot forward. And what Deacon was talking about is everyone puts together a good light, but the maritime industry, that's a tough industry, tough time away. So more than the MLC conventions, more than port state control inspections, more than flag state conventions that are inspecting, those types of visits from Stella Maris, the Siemens Church, those are good data points to find out what's really going on. Because when they put forth the good effort, when they see you coming or I'm coming, you need to have those many different data points to understand what's going on your ship and what the sailors are talking about. When sailors are happy, you can tell, you can feel it when you go on the deck plates. But when sailors are not happy and they're broken down, that's when the bad stuff starts happening. And that's the stuff that's hard. Once a crew is broken, the only thing that can fix it is to send them home and retry again with another crew. But recruiting the right crew and putting together the team, making sure it is a team, those are important. I'm sure Deacon can talk more about that. But Megan, I think in a long-winded way, that's my answer.
And Deacon Paul, if you have anything to add, please. I know a lot of ships are like families and do get very tight-knit very closely.
You do see it, as Rob said, tends to be a wide variety. Sometimes it depends on the nationalities of the crew on board. Most of the time, while they're working, they'll get along just fine. But in terms of getting together for socializing and all, sometimes there's a divide according to culture. It's not that they dislike each other. It's just that cultures differ in what they find fun to do and the like. One thing we have to, I think this is true about Americans and foreign seafarers as well, is that they tend, I know it's certainly true about Filipinos, they tend not to want to admit that there's a problem. If you go on board a Filipino ship and ask the crew everything is fine, that's the standard answer. It's not always fine. I was at a meeting in Manila with some wives of seafarers a few years ago, and I told them, every time I talk to your husbands or your sons, they say everything's fine, and one woman stood up and said, "Don't believe them. You have to," but you don't want to be intrusive either. But I think they start to feel comfortable with us as we go on board, and at least we get some opportunities to sit down and talk to them away from the crew, the rest of the crew, the ratings, away from the officers. I've had some situations where this was a number of years ago. I went on a ship. It was Ukrainian officers and Filipino ratings, and when I was in the mess, everything was fine but as soon as we got off the ship with the Filipinos, where they felt they're comfortable that they could talk, they started talking about the problems with some of not necessarily with the Ukrainian officers personally, but with the types of things they were asking them to do on the ship. So there can be those conflicts between ratings and officers, between different cultures that make it sometimes difficult for life to be as harmonious as it should be on the ship. Mm-hmm. And any little thing we can do to help them doesn't solve the problems necessarily, but at least can make them feel a little better for a few minutes.
Yeah, and it gets that start in that kind of safe space for them. So we thank you for your work, Deacon Paul. We really do. Rob, how are companies adopting practices in regards to MARPOL to remain compliant and maintain those safe working conditions?
Well, every company is required to have a safety management system, right? So it's a very detailed system that's in place, right? It's supposed to, it lays out the environmental policy, how things are going to be protected, what things need to be notified, procedures for the shipboard operations, and the lines of effort and the people who have the levels of communication. It lays out levels of authority, reporting, but more importantly than this well documented, every company has a beautiful SMS system. Is it being followed? Right? So what you're starting to see a lot more is, you're starting to see electronic tracking of certain things. Are they filling out more than just a piece of paper that we used to try to do 25 years ago? And did it really get filled out, or was it really backdated? Is that culture? You can leverage technology to follow up on things. Hey, listen, it's an ongoing discussion that we're going to be working aloft, and this is going to be this, or we're going to be doing a bunkering, and we've done our standard checklist. But a lot of companies, my former company, started to look at those documents and when are they being done? Are they being done after the fact? They're being done before the fact, like they're designed to do. So it raises the level of accountability, but there's no sacrifice that is greater than that of the sailor, right? But you have to also, as a company, put people on the ship to kind of follow up what's going on. At least 2 to 3 times a year, you have to get your superintendents on the ship. It was a hard thing during COVID, and we had to go off of local inspectors to try to give us the pulse of what was going on. But there's no sacrifice then that's greater than the sailor themselves. But we have to get our folks out there from the office, get on the deck plates and see that, feel it, taste it, eat their food. Literally, it's as simple as that. Getting out there, living their life. Even if you ride from a port to the other, you start to get the pulse of what's going on. We have the great policies that we talk about, but are they enforced? And do we hold ourselves accountable beyond the ship? If you're talking about the technical management, are they being held accountable? Are they being in the boardroom? Are we being held accountable? But more to the point, when we start talking about the environment, like Deacon said, are they telling the truth? Nobody wants to tell the boss that things are going awry. It takes a lot of time for them to feel comfortable and open it up. Asking smart questions is part of it, but developing the rapport with the people on board. Going to those conferences in their homeland. I'm glad that Deacon went out to the Manila officers conferences out there, those or unlicensed conferences, and talk to the families. That's how we get at that. The scars of centuries of cultural not talking about certain things or anything's bad, that exists. But that also exists on American flag ships too, where people didn't want to tell the office there was bad news. Bad news doesn't get better like with time with one. Even if I've always been a proponent that I'd rather hear the bad news, even if it turns out to be nothing. We work out a solution, but I'd rather hear it. You can't give me too much. Prioritize it, up the way. Otherwise, I'll have information overload. But you should be. Things happen in the maritime industry. Ships, the prop is always going to turn. Ships are always going to move forward. Metal is going to break. Hopefully, if the process works, we don't damage the environment and we don't damage our sailors. Everyone going home with their fingers and toes and no oil in the water or damage to the environment. You don't want to break a ship up on the shores because somebody didn't get enough sleep or somebody is just complacent about he's thinking his mind is 5,000 miles away of what's going on the home front. And these are the real problems if we don't address them head on, right? Is the sailor dealing with a family crisis at home? And if he's dealing with it, if his mindset is 5,000 miles away, and you find out about it, as a company, you have to do the right thing by the sailor. Can he go on? Okay, you may have to make the decision that at the technical management level that okay, this gentleman, this female sailor has, they need a knee. They need to take a knee, or maybe they're burnt out. Everyone's burnout level is substantial. I mean, to go to sea for 6 to 10 months a year is a lot. It's a lot to ask, and there's a lot of life that goes on when you're at sea, as Deacon talked about earlier. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, and Deacon Paul, do you have anything to add on what those companies are doing to adapt MARPOL safe practices to remain compliant?
I think, again, specifically to MARPOL, it's not something I would, but I think in terms of the overall well-being of seafarers, companies are making great strides these days. If that's one thing, perhaps there was not that I would like to have another COVID pandemic, but something that came out of it was a recognition that more had to be done for the not just the physical well-being of the seafarers, but their mental health as well. And there are now much greater efforts being done in that way. And I think that that's something that we need to keep working on. But I think it's very appreciated by the seafarers that I talk to.
Wonderful. We have time for one last question from myself before we see if our audience has any questions for our wonderful panelists. But how can the regulatory frameworks be strengthened to promote safety and in the maritime industry, in the workforce? Deacon Paul, I'll start with you.
Well, I think it's, as Rob has said, it's mostly the enforcement that needs to be strengthened. I think there are lots of the provisions of MARPOL, the provisions of MLC 2006, and there are some recent amendments to MLC 2006 that are going to help in particularly in terms of connectivity, if that works out. But it's the enforcement that has to be strong. You can have all the regulations on the books that you want and have a perfect world in the book, but if it's not being strengthened. And so we need, I think as Rob said, we need more people, onshore people, getting on the ships to see what's really going on sometimes, not snooping or not being seen as spies necessarily, but to have eyes open and really be able to monitor what is going on. I think here in the States, we have, the Coast Guard with port state inspection is always very thorough on those things. Our friends up in Canada, I know they're very thorough as well. Other parts of the world, who knows? Port state inspection may not really be port state inspection as we think of it here in the States. So I don't have any great solutions to this problem, but I think that that's where the efforts have to be. The rules and regulations are good, can always be improved, but it's the enforcement side of things that needs to be really beefed up.
Rob, do you have anything to add from a captain's perspective?
Yeah, no, you have you hit the nail on the head there, Deacon. Not all port state controls inspections are equal. They are not. If you're talking about the Western world, Europe, those are more stringent than others. Whereas you go to parts of Africa or South America, they may not be to the same level of diligence. It's not to say that they're not looking for important things, but I think the level of training, maybe with the port state control inspections, may not be to the level of vigor that the U.S. Coast Guard has with their staff that goes aboard. And maybe it's not a maritime nation, but it has maritime ports. Maybe not as many seafarers that are aware about certain things or the requirements. But I'm with you along the lines of getting involved, knowing what's going on, oversight, you know, but more to the point of inspections, it's the culture. It's if you're relying on inspections to bring about change, or a regulation to bring about change, it all goes back to that symbiote circle where everybody on the shore and everybody on the ship understands the why. When everyone understands the why we're doing certain things, or why these laws or these regulations are in place, the standard you ignore becomes the new standard. So if you walk past something that is, the scuppers are not in place during a bunkering, so the plugs are not in the rain holes, and you ignore that, well, that's the new standard, and everyone's just going to say, "Oh, we always did that," and that's how oil winds up in places it shouldn't be, right? But understanding the why, getting our folks on the aboard shore, at sea, at our shore, and the people on the waterfront, understanding the why certain things happen. I think as a collective, as an ecosystem, that people can understand as we strive to go forward. Because I think I don't know a single person that doesn't want someone to get hurt. Nobody wants to get hurt at sea, and nobody ashore wants anyone to get hurt on board a ship. I think we're all united in that, right? So that's a good thing to start from. And how do we get them there? And maybe a little bit of understanding from the shore side, the people that participate in the commerce or buy even things from, whether it be IKEA or Costco, understanding what is where that stuff is coming from. So I think people understanding what kind of cargo is moving, or how it's moving, and a little bit of understanding on all parts can go a long way.
And education is so important. Well, but before we do some wrap ups, do we have any questions from our audience that is joining us today? If you do, feel free to put it into the chat right now, and I will read it to our speakers. And don't be shy. See if any come through. Well, while you guys are thinking about, I'm going to, if this conversation was something that you enjoyed so much and you want to continue this, you can join us at our Safety at Sea seminar and the AMVER Awards, which is happening in Washington, D.C. next Thursday, May 18th. And you can join us and you can continue this discussion. Deacon Paul will be there and we'll be talking in depth about cybersecurity, what's being done within the maritime industry, and listening to industry leaders talk about the importance of safety at sea and the mariner welfare and what's being done to protect such an important workforce and what's being done to increase the security behind them. And don't forget, we have other webinar series coming up. We're going to be doing our next one on June 14th. Registration is open for that. All of these are all open, and the dates for our November and December webinar series will be posted shortly. So make sure you register to get those email reminders about our upcoming webinar series. Well, I want to thank everyone for joining us this afternoon. Please feel free, if you would like to take our Operation Compliance within MARPOL, covering all 6 annexes of MARPOL, you can scan this QR code and take our Operation Compliance Training Assessment, and we will send you a certificate within the next few days where you can actually have that MARPOL Operation Compliance and be a little bit more forward in saving our seas and promoting a sustainable maritime and shipping industry. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining us this afternoon. I didn't see any questions in the chat, so that is all I have for you guys today. So thank you so much. And thank you to our wonderful presenters. You guys were wonderful, and it was a great conversation. So thank you so much for being with us today, guys. Have a great afternoon, everyone.